Our focus today is on reviewing in Chapter 9 for the quiz, specifically dealing with adding, subtracting, and multiplying binomials, and also factoring binomials using the greatest common factor. So we're going to kind of go over some review problems from the actual test review itself. So in this first problem, it wants us to write things in standard form. Remember, standard form is when you have to go from the exponent that's the biggest down to the exponent that's the smallest. Now the big deal in this one is you also have to make sure any like terms you put together. So if I were looking at this, first of all, I notice there's not any like terms. But I also notice in looking at this that g cubed is the highest exponent. So if I'm going to put things in standard form, probably starting out with columns that look like this would be a good practice. Then if I look at this, for g cubed I have negative g cubed. That's here. Then 3g squared would come next. That's the next biggest. And this 4g I assume is positive 4 at the beginning. That's going to be plus 4g here. And then minus 2 on the end. Remember when you're talking about standard form, that should be the last one, the number that stands by itself. So if I were looking up here now, negative 3g cubed plus 3g squared plus 4g minus 2 would give us D as our overall answer. Now, this one says find the degree. The degree is the highest exponent and what's there. In this monomial, this one has just one term that's here. The term is 6, x to the 8th, and y to the 5th. Because it's one term, we take the variables and we add those exponents together. So if I were to take the sum of these two, 8 and 5 would be 13. That means the degree is going to be 13, which is C. Now this one says match it with its name. So 6x cubed minus 9x plus 3. So in this, remember we talked about naming. Naming kind of has a first name and a last name. First name has to do with the degree. Last name has to do with the number of terms. So in this problem, the highest exponent is this 3, which gives it the first name of cubic. This one has 3 terms, which means its last name is trinomial. So its full name is cubic trinomial, which means in this one that my answer is going to be A. Okay, next one. Wants us to simplify the difference. So remember with adding and subtracting, with both of those we have to put things in standard form. If we look at this, we can see that w squared is our highest exponent. Then it would be w and then our number. So we're going to make 3 columns here. Now we're going to start out by taking this first one and sorting it into the first row here. So 4w squared minus 4w minus 8. Then I'm going to take this and put it in the second row. Now notice that I didn't highlight this minus sign. I'm going to have to distribute that eventually. But let's get our stuff organized first. So I have 2w squared plus 3w minus 6. And now I have to distribute that negative to everything that's in here. That means this 2 becomes negative, 3 becomes negative, and this 6 becomes positive. And then I'm going to draw my line. Now I can go through and total up my columns. So 2w squared minus 7w minus 2. So on number 4, that means that A will be our answer. Do remember, just take this when it's a subtraction and write that out just the way it is, and then distribute the negative. Much easier process when you do it that way. Okay, and the next one, simplify the sum. So if I were to look at these, I have to make columns like I did in the last one. But if I look at this problem, u cubed is the highest exponent. So I'm going to start out by just making my columns to give us somewhere to put stuff. And then I'm going to start by taking this first one and sorting it in this first row. So 4u cubed plus 4u squared plus 2. And then I'm going to take the second one and sort it into the second row. So 6u cubed. Notice I'm going to have to skip the u squared because I don't have one. I'm going to go to just the u column because I have minus 2u. And then plus 8. Do my plus sign, draw my line. I'm going to add some zeros in here as my placeholders. And then I'm going to go through now and start totaling my columns. So 10u cubed plus 4u squared minus 2u plus 10. So now that I have this part done, I'm going to go look for where that matches here, and on 5 that means D would be my answer. Now remember, I'm going to look for this totaling down the side somewhere, so be sure to show your work. Okay, next one. Since this is a multiplication, this one has more terms than this one. So I'm actually going to use my shortcut method. So here's my first piece right there. I'm going to add a 1. So this part goes first because it has more terms. Then underneath it I'm going to put my 2n because it has the least amount of digits. So that means that this part right here is where this comes from. Then I'm just going to start taking this 2n and multiplying it by everything. So 2n times 4 is 8n. Now before I go on, if you need to add ones here so it helps you remember what you're doing here, 2n to the first times 3n to the first means it's going to be 6n squared. Then 2n times 1n squared is going to be 2n cubed. So really we're just trying to make sure we take this 2n and distribute it to every single thing that's here. That means if I have 2n cubed plus 6n squared plus 8n, that means that my answer is going to be A. Okay, now, same thought on this one. For multiplying, this has more terms, so it has to go first. So 4x squared plus 4y to the 6th. And then I'm going to put the 8x squared below. That's where this part comes from. Then I'm going to add my multiplication sign out here and my line. So this one's a little tricky because when I go to multiply these two together, it's not as though these two are going to combine in any other way besides the coefficients. Let's take a look at what I mean. 8 times 4 is going to give me positive 32. That's the combining we can do. This x to the second and y to the sixth, we can't really combine them any more than writing them next to each other. Do remember when we write them, though, they do want them to be in alphabetical order, which means x should come before y. Okay, now let's continue multiplying. 8x squared times 4x squared, still going to combine to that 32 in the front, but these x's I can actually put together. So there's 2 here and 2 here, which means in my answer there's going to be 4, because when bases are alike, we add those exponents. So that means that on this one, if I have 32x to the 4th plus 32x squared y to the 6th, that means B will be my answer. Now this one says factor the polynomial. That means that they want you to use greatest common factor. So I'm going to rewrite this below because this is a technique that I've kind of used all the way through this section. Write it just the way it is. And if I look at all these, they all have a 2 that will go into all of them, and they all have at least one x in common. So that means the greatest common factor is 2x. So I know I'm going to skip a line, and then I'm going to write 2x. And then I'm going to do my parentheses. Now remember, this is where we take whatever the greatest common factor is, and we divide it all the way through. And I can already tell just by looking that these x's are going to cancel, and so are those 2's. So this, x to the third, and I have 1 here, so it's going to leave me 2. So remember, we assume these are 1's. This one, 4 divided by 2 is 2. There's an x here, and I take away 1, I'll be left with 1. And then 8 divided by 2 is 4. So on 8, I only have this 2x squared that's out here, and then this x squared plus 2x plus 4. So that means it would match A. Okay, on this one, we're going to factor using the greatest common factor as well. So I'm going to have to be able to figure out what that is in a minute. But remember, just like the last one, I'm going to write this one here. Now, on this problem, the greatest common factor in this, first of all, the biggest number that will go into both 40 and 16 would be 8. If I look at the w's, I have 11 here, and I have 6 here, which means the least that they can share in common is 6. So remember how I skipped my line. I'm going to write my greatest common factor out here. Now this is where I have to divide each thing by the greatest common factor. So over here I can actually see these cancel. So 40 divided by 8 is going to be 5. As far as my w's, I have 11 here. I'm going to take away 6, which leaves 5. Then 16 divided by 8 is going to be 2. So on this one, I can see my answer is going to be A. See if we can fit one more in there. On number 10, it says find the greatest common factor of the terms of the polynomial. So I have 8 x to the 6th plus 32 x to the 3rd. So first of all, if I was trying to find my greatest common factor, the biggest number that goes into both 8 and 32 would be 8 itself. So the 8's kind of easy to see. That means out of these answers, I know automatically that can't be included. Now there are 6 x's here and there are 3 here, which means that they will have 3 altogether. Now on your review itself, there's actually a negative that's there. So if I were going to choose my answer, C is going to be my answer.